Hi, and welcome to the Foodbod Pod YouTube channel. In this video, you will see the behind the scenes footage of when we were recording our second episode for the podcast. And we have videoed the whole episode as well, so that you can see us in the flesh, see us having our conversation, but also to be able to see the recipes that are being made. So in this episode, we are talking to the very brilliant Cherie. She is sharing her top tips, she's sharing recipes, she is just delighting with all of her just brilliant kitchen knowledge, but her wonderful personality. As you will see, we had a great time. So in this video, you may see or hear things that aren't on the podcast because we were recording audially. So this is very much the background shoot so that you can see what went on as we filmed it, but that will also explain why we don't really look at the camera. So I do apologise. You'll see my photographer appearing. You may get different bits of background noise to what you hear in the actual episode on the podcast audio, but I hope that you will enjoy it. And I hope that you just see what pure fun we had in recording this. So here we are. This is our second episode for the podcast. You can find the links to be able to listen to it. You can find all of Cherie's links on the information attached to this video. And I hope you enjoy it. Okay. Today, I am very excited to be here in the kitchen with Cherie. And this is just so exciting for us because we know each other from Instagram, and that's all where it started from, Instagram and sourdough. And now we're actually here in her kitchen today so that we can talk about Cherie's fabulous food. She's going to share a recipe or two with us and just give us some tips and general chat. I think a lot of what this podcast will be is listening to the two of us chatting and laughing.
Good point, yes.
So thank you for having us here in your kitchen. Thank you for letting us come and take over. Before we get into anything else, just tell us a bit about you and what it is about food and cooking. What brought you to food? Why do you love it so much?
So first of all, thank you guys for coming here. I think for me it was, whenever I was wee, I just loved going into my granny's kitchen in County Armagh, Portadown. She was a brilliant baker. My great aunt, her sister-in-law, was a great baker as well, and preserver. And my grannies and great aunts on the other side also were. But my mummy never had time to cook because she was a full-time sister in the hospital, all with the troubles. So we just sort of cooked for ourselves at home. And I don't actually know where I got recipes or anything like that. And I don't know where those ideas came from. But I would be the one who was in the doctor's surgery or the dentist's surgery, and I'd be looking at People's Friends magazine or Woman at Home when I was like no age, just to see how all these ingredients came together to make this lovely food. So I don't really know, I just always knew that I wanted to cook. So I knew I couldn't afford to go to cookery school, and my parents absolutely couldn't afford for me to go to cookery school. My daddy was a farmer. And so I became a medical secretary in order to get to London to go to cookery school, and I went to Leeds, and it took me a long time, but I saved up, and that's what I did. I put myself through cookery school. Only for 3 months. I could only afford 3 months, but then I was such a keno, they asked me to stay on to be a demonstration assistant. So that's where that's come from.
So do you feel then, if you sat reading the recipes, that you almost kind of absorbed some of the recipes and the cooking ideas as you were reading magazines?
Yes, I think so, and I was just brought to a different place as well. Do you know, I remember thinking, where did they get those ingredients from, and how did they put those together? And then whenever I went to the granny's kitchen, right, the smell on baking day was just incredible. That smell of scorched flour, she always used a griddle, and there were cakes of, she called them cakes of bread, wheaten bread lined up, sort of farls lined up, and then you opened her cupboard and there'd be like all the different jams. It was like all these like jewel pots of jams. Oh, it was lovely. It was so nice. And then on a Sunday evening we'd go around there, right, and we would always have the most delicious food on a Sunday evening. The fire would be lit, literally, sounds very cliche, but it was a turf fire, coal fire lit, beautiful. Oh, so nice.
It's everything that I didn't grow up with. And it just, everything that just sounds just so perfectly, romantically wonderful about cooking and baking and what you grow up with. And it sounds like a perfect granny. And
well, no, she was fierce.
oh, well,
She
yes,
was definitely fierce, but a lovely woman. She had 13 children. So so they were, you know, she made all this food for them, and anytime anyone would come around to the house, she would look after them as well, and you know, the cakes and everything, all that sort of stuff. So definitely, yeah.
So, I mean, I see all the preserving and everything you do. So is that where it all comes from?
I'm sure, yes, I'm sure it is. And my Auntie Evelyn and my Aunt Evie on my daddy's side as well, they were great preservers as well. So I think that's where I get the whole love from, of going around the hedgerows and scouring around the hedgerows and seeing what I can use. And you know, now at the moment it's rose hips and there's sloes, and the crab apples have gone, but I've got some that I kept in the freezer. So it's, and I love that whole alchemy of the way food comes together. Like, you've got this murky stuff, liquid that comes through a jelly bag. You add sugar and you heat it up, and suddenly this foam clears on the top, and you've got this crystal clear liquid underneath that you pour into jars. And it's like, how did that ever happen? Do you know, I love stuff like that. I love seeing how the ingredients come together to do that. You know.
See, I've never made anything like that.
Next time I'm doing, you have to come over. You have to come over.
Okay, you make me, yeah. And you see, when I first started to teach myself how to make Middle Eastern food, and
Yes.
you know, foods from the Far East and things like that, I wanted to understand how different spices went together, and to understand, you know, what did people put, you know, in the recipes. So I did a similar thing. I read a lot of cookbooks. I didn't make the recipes necessarily, but I read a lot. So I bought all the Ottolenghi cookbooks. I read what spices they were putting together and things, to start to have an understanding of what was paired and what you used in different places. So a similar kind of absorption of the recipes, to start to understand where was their starting point, what was, you know, if you took a certain ingredient, what was the key thing that they would put with it, you know, just to have some education.
Yeah, but what made you want to go down the Lebanese or the Middle Eastern route? What was it? Was it a restaurant around you, or what was it that you really?
Oh, because I lived in the Middle East as a child.
Oh, I did not know that.
Oh, did you not?
No.
Oh, okay.
Oh my goodness. Where?
Well, I lived in Dubai before anyone had ever heard of it. I moved to Dubai in 1984 when I was 12 years old.
Oh my gracious.
So I lived there when it was still mostly desert. But that's where all of my influences and interests come from in food. That's where my tastes were formed, really. So I got to a point where I wanted to learn how to make them for myself. So when I used to go back and visit and bring all of the ingredients back with me here, because you couldn't get, especially where I lived, you couldn't get Middle Eastern food. You couldn't get those ingredients. So I can remember messaging my mum and saying, oh, they're talking about something called frika in this country. So she got me this huge bag of frika from Abu Dhabi. And this was, you know, not refined. This was not cleaned. This stuff stank.
Yeah.
But it was before anyone had it here, you know, so it was, I wanted to know what to do with those ingredients. The difference is now, on my doorstep, I can actually go and buy the ingredients and the same makes as I could buy in the Middle East, now in the Turkish shop on my doorstep. So I can make the same foods, you know, in my version.
Yes.
You know, so anyway, but yeah, so that's where mine comes from. That's where the influences came from, that and travels.
Yes.
So, you know, my family was shoved around a lot. We lived in lots of different places. So my food tastes were born from those travels, rather than, you know, in a kitchen smelling them with your granny.
Yes.
You know, but yeah, so it all comes back to the childhood things anyways. But anyway, we're not talking about me. We're here to talk about you.
No, but don't you love all those different shops though?
Yes.
You know, and all the smells when you go in and the sights.
Well, I've just watched your TikToks and Instagram where you've just been in, was it Marrakesh?
Yes.
And you know, when you've gone through the spice souks and you've gone through those food markets, you know, that was my childhood.
Oh.
You know, and you'd walk around, you know, those pyramids of spices.
Yes.
And just, you know, taking it all in, and the grubbier the better.
Oh my word,
Really?
that's the thing. We had street food on the day before we left, but we knew it was good because we'd been there the day before as well, and it was just so delicious. And bread, you see, bread is in my DNA, and I just love any bread. So there was the backbit, you know, the round flat one, and they took the skewers off, the brochettes off the heat, and he just cleaned them off into the bread with some tomato sauce. Oh, delicious.
So maybe we should explain then, actually, for people that are listening, how actually we know each other. So this was during lockdown when you decided to start trying to make sourdough.
Oh my word. I had tried to make sourdough 7 times before I found you, my guru. And I remember saying to Andy, do you know what, I find a lady on Instagram and she seems really good at what she does at sourdough. And Andy goes, oh, flip me, Cherie, not more sourdough. And I said, no, seriously, I think this one's really going to work. So, because I saw these positive things coming through in your Instagram. So whenever I spoke to you and I said, oh, Elaine, do you know what? Or DM'd you, I was like, this is now the 7th time it hasn't worked. And you need, some people say you need grapes in your starter. Some people say you need apple skins. Some people say you need like the water from 40 Virgins up a mountain. It's meant to, you know, everything's meant to be. So spring water and all the rest. And you said, no, all you do is you take your tap water and it'll be fine. And I said, but our tap water is just filled with chlorine. You leave the top off, Cherie, and the chlorine evaporates overnight. And I was like, no. So anyway, you talked me through each stage, and the very first starter I made before lockdown, it's still going now.
Oh, brilliant. But I remember the messages.
Well,
I remember the voice messages, and I was talking through it. But because I remember one of the key problems was the fact that because you have an Aga, your kitchen is hot.
Yes.
And therefore your starter was getting thin, it was working too fast because of the heat.
Yes.
And that wasn't something that you were aware of at that point, but that was one of the key things that made a change to your starter, wasn't it? It was moving it away from the heat.
You're so right. I had not a notion about any of that. And you were so patient, Elaine. You really were. You answered so many questions because honestly, I was beside myself because this starter had risen. And then it had dropped so quickly. Yeah. But I could see all these tiny bubbles and I was like, there's loads of tiny bubbles. And you're like, yeah, but they're not strong enough bubbles, Cherie. So just give it a wee bit more flour and not as much water. And it was just this brilliant thing where you had told me what to do and I did it and it worked. And I just loved it. Honestly, I've got 2 on the go and I even dry it out now and send it to people. But again, completely your idea. Even my boys never ate anything but white bread. When they were wee, I always had them. I prided myself on brown bread. And when they went over to Northern Ireland, they had white bread for the first time. They didn't know it existed, white bread, because I would always give them brown bread. And then whenever I started to make the sourdough, that's all they ate now. They eat wraps, but sourdough, I don't buy any more bread now. That's great. So thank you for that.
Well, one of the key things that I want to ask everybody, which I think is going to be brilliant coming from your kitchen, is for me, it's all about the tips.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the key thing that I found most interesting when I watch cookery programs and I read recipes, anything, it's all about the tips and the little things people do in their kitchens. Mm-hmm. And it's the things that you'll think not that important, but actually it's that the little tip that's going to make a difference to someone. So what would you say are your 3 top tips in your kitchen in baking or cooking?
So because of my upbringing, I was always taught to be very frugal. So I freeze an awful lot of stuff. So kaffir lime, if I go to an Oriental supermarket, I'll do a big shop and I freeze my kaffir lime leaves, chilies, lemongrass and ginger. And when I get the ginger home, I scrub the flesh or the skin clean and I put it into the freezer, and then as I grate the ginger on a microplane, it just falls away like ginger snow. So you don't have all those fibres in the back of your grater.
So you grate it whilst it's still frozen?
Whilst it's still frozen.
Oh wow.
And it is so fine, it's like powder, but it is brilliant and it works really well. And because the skin is clean, and it's so fine with a microplane, you don't need to take the skin off before you grate it.
Yeah. And
it just works, an absolute treat. And then if you need a lump of ginger, obviously you need it. I just leave it on the side to soften for a wee while, and I add that into my blender or whatever. So that's definitely, because so many people, whenever I used to run my demonstrations, they used to say, but ginger doesn't last, Cherie, it goes blue in my fridge. And I said, yeah, but what you do is you bring it home, you wash it, and you put it in your freezer, and it's brilliant. It lasts for months.
Okay.
So that's one of the things. Another thing would be, I would say, is when my son actually thought of this one, I said, I have to think of a top tip. Harry, what would be yours? What would you think? And he says, Mommy, the chopping board. So when you have used your chopping board for meat or for fish, always rinse it off in cold water and scrub it off first of all with cold water, then use hot water and a fairy liquid. Because if you put hot water onto it straight away, it cooks the proteins in your board, and the gunk that's on there afterwards is shocking.
Okay.
And if you use a paint scraper once a month for your boards, it keeps them as clean as anything. So I use wooden boards. I don't really use plastic boards. I suppose I should do, but I don't. But I've got a different boards for sweet and different boards for savoury. So that's another one. And then the last one I would say is whenever I make lemon curd, or if I'm making a fruit coulis, something like that, I always use, when I'm putting it through a sieve, I use a metal sieve, but I always make sure that I use a silicone ladle, because if you use a metal ladle, first of all, a ladle is really useful because it's the shape of the bowl. The bowl of the ladle is the shape of the sieve, so you go round and round, and it falls through so much quicker, rather than going back and forth with a spatula or a spoon. But I see so many people using metal spoons. But when I ran my demonstrations, so a lot of people said to me, but Cherie, I've made such and such before and it just tastes metallic and the colour's funny. And I said, that's because you're using metal on metal. So if you use a silicone ladle and push it through, or a silicone sieve and a metal ladle, that's fine, but it can't be metal on metal, because the acidity of what you're putting through the sieve will react with the metal being rubbed together, and it could discolour your food and make it taste metallic.
Oh wow!
So, and also when you use a ladle, all of the gubbins that you don't want get stuck around the ladle, and it comes out in one go.
So is that something you wanted to show us?
Yes.
Whilst we're here.
I'll
Okay,
do
because you're gonna be educating me on that one. Because
Okay.
again, it's not something I've ever made.
Right.
So
Okay.
that's going to be interesting to see.
Okay.
So that's one of the things that you're going to show us, is
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So we are going to come on to a couple of quick and easy recipes.
Yes.
If you're okay for that.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, but before we get on to that, one of my other great things, and something else that I will be asking everybody, is about leftovers. Now, I think this is going to fit with your frugal ways, but to me, I love leftovers.
Me too, Elaine.
I think that they have more flavour than anything else. Whatever I make, I tend to make too much, so that there's always leftovers, so that there's something to do with them. So a lot of my recipes have been created from having stuff that's left over and just chucking it in some dough. So what would you say would be your favourite leftovers, your favourite thing to do with some leftovers?
So on a Sunday, when we have a Sunday roast, I know you're vegetarian, so maybe not so much for you, but if we have a Sunday roasted chicken especially, I make extra of the pigs and blankets and the potatoes and the vegetables and everything, and I make pot pies with extra leftover roast, so everything goes in. So I mix the leftover chicken with the chop up the pigs and blankets, the roast potatoes, the cauliflower, bits of cauliflower cheese, everything.
Wow.
And put them all into wee pot pies. And do you know what? I bought all my wee pots in the pie pots in the charity shop, and they were like 25p each. And I lined them all up and put them there. And then as the boys feel hungry, well, not Harry, he's vegetarian, but as the other two feel hungry, or we do during the week, we just take them out and put them from the freezer into the aga or into the oven, and they're done.
Do you need to add a sauce to that, or you just put?
Sorry, the gravy.
Okay, so the gravy as well.
And then you put the sauce from the cauliflower cheese. Now it sounds like a real
sounds great to me.
But I promise you, it's so nice. And then for Harry, I'll do him more cauliflower cheese and potatoes and vegetables, and then I'll make more sauce, cheese sauce for him. And then same thing.
So is that, you say pot pie, does that mean it has some pastry over the top?
Puff pastry, I just put all butter puff pastry over the top. And honestly, it works a treat.
Oh my God, that sounds good.
And now don't get me wrong, the boys would eat like so much food, but I make sure that I keep some of that aside for during the, you know, for those pot pies,
Yeah.
because otherwise they'd eat the whole lot.
God, sounds fabulous. In which case then, that comes on to my next question. What is your favourite family meal to put together? I mean, what favourite and kind of easiest, what would be your fast, easy thing for during the week?
So it's actually a chicken fried rice thing that I do. I always cook the rice first of all. So I rinse off the rice in a sieve, and I do 2 cups of rice, 4 cups of water, put it into the saucepan. I put a tea towel over the top and the lid on top of that, and then I bunch the tea towel all up and tie it with a elastic band. And I simmer the rice for about 10 minutes, then turn the heat off, and then it just gently steams. Once the water has gone down, I put peas on top of that, so they just steam. Then I fry off chicken, broccoli, whatever else, carrots, whatever I've got, put in hoisin sauce and put in grated ginger, some lemongrass, kaffir lime, mix the whole lot together, put the rice and peas in, and that's it. And then I just make some soy omelets, because we've got our own chicken, so we've always got lots of eggs. So we just whisk up a couple of eggs with a tablespoon of soy sauce and do those in the non-stick frying pan, and they're really nice and thin, and just slice those all up, and that's what we have. Spring onions on top, and that's what we do.
You make it all sound so easy.
No, but that, I promise you that is. And then obviously I just take the chicken, do Harry a separate bag, a separate frying pan, you know, or wok for him, and then whatever's left over he takes back to uni with him.
So then my question probably will fit with Harry as well. So you know, as you mentioned, I'm vegetarian.
Yes.
Okay, so if I was coming for dinner, what would you make for me?
So I would make for you this, which is, so, well, can we say lunch? Can we say lunch instead? Because it's more of a lunchtime dish. So it's just a sheet of all butter puff pastry.
Yeah.
And then over the top of that is ricotta mixed with, it's a good thing you're not vegan, mixed with parmesan and gruyere. And then in a frying pan, I roasted off or toasted off, fried off, whatever, some aubergine. And then I put the baby plum tomatoes into the oven for about 15 minutes with some salt, pepper, and a wee bit of tarragon and thyme over the top, a dried tarragon and thyme. And then over the top of the puff pastry, you put the cheese mixture with the ricotta and the eggs, and then you put over the roast vegetables. Then there's going to be lots of roquette over the top, and more wee baby tomatoes that have been roasted off, and big shavings of pecorino and parmesan. Drizzle of extra virgin olive oil. You can see what you think later on.
Yeah, my problem now is, of course, we're gonna see how good these mics are, and they're gonna get my stomach rumbling, really. And this is a recipe that you're giving us, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna have a link to this recipe that's gonna be on our webpage so that people can go and find it. So
Well, do you know what's good about it too, Elaine? Right, you can have everything done in advance the day before. And then the next morning, or whenever your friends are coming over or whatever, or for your own supper, you just put it all together in like 5 minutes and get it into the oven, and it's done.
Do you know, I deprived myself of pastry because I love pastry and I could eat it in a big way. So I am thoroughly looking forward to that. In fact, I think we should just keep going so that we can get on to lunch.
Marvellous, marvellous.
Okay, so you're going to make a couple of things for us.
Yes.
And we're just going to, if you don't mind, I mean, you're going to be brilliant at this anyway. We'll just talk through what you're doing as we do it.
Yes.
So that our listeners can hear what's going on. And at the same time, Cherie has an aga, so she's going to be talking about how she cooks in an aga as well and what the slight differences might be. So please tell us, what are you going to make?
Right, so I'm going to make some Irish soda farls.
I'm so pleased about this because I've seen you put these on Instagram. I have lusted over these and they look amazing.
Oh, do you know what? They're just, and I know I say this all the time, they're simple, they're this or that, but honestly, here I've got in a bowl 400 grams of plain flour.
Okay.
Right? So into this bowl I'm going to put a teaspoon of salt, and a teaspoon of bicarb soda. So years ago, my granny would have put the bicarb soda into her hand, and she would have really pressed it through. Nowadays I sieve it. The reason you would sieve it or press it through your hand is to get any lumps out of the bicarb soda, otherwise you have yellow bits through your bread.
Okay.
And that was not
I've
something
never
like,
sieved my bicarbonate of soda. That's really useful.
yeah, or just
Okay.
break it up in your hand and put it through. And also it just aerates the bread a wee bit more, gets everything mixed up a wee bit more. So these at home, right, are, this is what Granny made cakes and cakes of. And they'd all be lined up, and she always used old pillowcases that couldn't be, you know, maybe they had a hole in them or something. She washed them, they were as white as snow, and when she had her finished making her bread, she would always wrap it in these pillowcases. I use muslin now these days, but she did that to keep the crust nice and soft and the bread really soft.
Okay.
So that's
So we've got plain flour.
plain flour.
And have you, would it always be plain flour? Have you ever tried making them with different flours?
I always use plain flour.
Okay.
Now at home they use what's called soda bread flour. So you've already got your salt and your bicarb of soda in there, but you can't buy that over here.
Okay.
So and anyway in the old days this is how it would have been. Do you
Okay.
know?
And you've got your lovely big mason cash bowl.
Yeah.
That was always what was in my mum's kitchen. I remember that.
So
Yeah.
Granny Neil always baked her bread in these, and although I've got a small amount of flour in here, I always have to use these.
Okay.
So 400 grams of flour, and into this is going half a pint of buttermilk. Right, so just get that in there, and I'm going to add a wee touch of flour as well, water as well, cold water. So I'm just going to stir the buttermilk in, see how that goes, see how much more water, I need. The reason I'm not adding too much more buttermilk is because I don't really want to open a whole carton of buttermilk to add in here. I can add water, and water just keeps it really lovely and light anyway.
So
Granny,
you judge the water by how it feels?
yes, so
Okay.
once I know bakers love getting their hands dirty. I'm just one of those who likes to leave it to the last minute.
I'm not big on getting my hands
No,
dirty.
because it's just too sticky. So Granny Neil always used a rounded knife, you know, like a bone handled knife. But this one was made for me by, do you know Bodger?
I do, and because
Gotcha.
of you, I've got things he's made for me.
Oh,
So if you look at the cover on my current book, it's got the wooden scoop was made by Bodger because of you. Because I went in. This is the power of social media.
Well, he's absolutely brilliant. He is just brilliant. So I'm just adding in literally maybe a tablespoon of water there, and then bit by bit I'm going to get my hand in and just see how much how much more, if any, I need to add.
Look at the action of your hands. This is a woman that knows what she's doing with a big bowl of dough.
So it's really important to make sure this dough isn't too wet, isn't too sticky.
So is this one of those recipes that's got the alchemy between the buttermilk and the bicarbonate of soda?
Yes, because that would make it, those work together to make it rise a wee bit. So it gives them that nice pillowy texture. So
Is this how you would make soda bread then?
yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah, and like a loaf of soda bread, yes.
So the farls is what, smaller version?
So the farl means quarter or quadrant in Ulster Scots.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so when I bring this all together, I'm going to put this onto a board and roll it all out into a big circle, a big flat circle, then I'm going to cut it into quarters. Now, the reason I'm adding the water so slowly is, as Granny Neil always said, you can add to, but you can't take from.
Always.
So, what I'm going to do is just put it now out.
So when would you have had soda farls? What kind of meal would you have had them with, or when would they have?
Breakfast or tea, right?
Okay.
So what we would do is we would have them with cheddar cheese and strawberry jam. Oh, I tell you, you see this whole thing about umami and all the rest, like we were doing it years ago.
Yeah,
But
people always, it's home cooks that are doing all these things long before it gets anywhere else.
But so what I'm going to do is put a wee bit of the flour just across onto my board. My hand is nicely floured as well. So I'm just going to just get that rounded off so I don't have to.
So if
it's
you
nice
put
and
the
lightly.
flour on your board, it's not going to affect the flour mix. It's not going to.
No, it just stops it from sticking to your board. Then what I'm going to do is raise the top of my aga lid, the simmering lid, so the one that's not so hot.
So these are two different. The lids on these are two different temperatures.
Yes, so the one on the left is hot, the one on the right is slightly cooler.
Okay, and they're on all the time.
Yeah, they run all the time because
Okay.
my aga runs on gas.
Okay.
And then what you do is just a sprinkle of flour over the top.
And that doesn't burn then on there.
It'll scorch.
But you want that flavour, do you?
Yeah.
Oh.
Do you know, it just takes me back. So just that wafting.
Well,
Please
believe us that it smells good.
Just the flour on top. So Granny obviously used a griddle pan. If you don't have, the griddle pan or the aga whatever, just do it in a frying pan, a dry frying pan with a nice bit of flour in the bottom, just a tiny bit, just to get it, slightly scorched.
So did you grow up with an aga, or you had to
No.
learn how to cook with one?
I learned to cook with one.
Okay, well I'm going to ask you for some tips on that once you're done.
Yeah, definitely. So now the soda bread or the dough has come out and it's on the floured board. So what I'm doing is just ridging gently.
Oh, so you're not rolling heavily?
No.
You're just...
And when I do start to roll, I'll do it lightly, okay? Because
Okay, so you just start with so all Cherie is doing is taking the roll and just kind of pushing it into it.
and it's kept in a round circle, okay?
Okay, because when I roll dough out, I never keep the round. I never manage to keep it round. So is this how you
Is
do
that
it?
for pastry even? Or for
Anything.
bread?
I'm not great on pastry and stuff like that.
Okay, so when we were at Leeds, we were always taught to keep your pastry round, because a lot of the time it was for a tart or something, do you know what I mean? And to ridge first of all, so you're not putting as much pressure on the dough.
Well, there's an extra tip, everybody. It's really cool. So you're just taking it and just pushing into it gently across the top before you start to then roll it.
Exactly, and then you want to just gently turn it around as you move it, and then that helps, with keep its shape. Because I have to be honest, whenever I started doing it, my flour or my circles weren't really circles; they were more like the map of Tasmania. Do you know what I mean? They were sort of that shape. So what you want to do is just take it to about the size of a dinner plate, because you have to remember it's going to be thin now. But
it's going to rise, is it?
That's right, with the bicarbonate soda, okay, it's going to rise. So now we've got it in a nice circle. So what I'm going to do is just cut it in half.
And we're talking, the round is literally about the size of a dinner plate.
Yeah.
And then you're cutting it into the quarters.
And then in quarters.
And we're probably talking about 1 centimetre thick.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we're going to take each piece, each quarter.
And just place it on the heat.
Absolutely. And what we want is that scorched flour look on the bottom of each farl.
Oh, is that where you get the brown
Yes.
piece from? Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So if you're doing it in a griddle, that's what the griddle would have done in the
Yes,
past. It's
that's
given it the
right.
lines.
So Granny used to always, now this is whenever my mummy was a wee girl, Granny would have used a goose feather or a turkey feather to clean off the griddle first of all, because the griddle was always hanging down under the fire. Do you know what I mean? So there'd be loads of bits and pieces all over it. So she'd brush that all off, then put her flour on, so just skite a bit of flour
With
on
a
top.
feather?
She'd clean it with the feather.
Why is that?
Because they always had geese and they always had, the turkeys at Christmas. They used to, have their own food all the time.
So it was strong enough to use like a brush?
Absolutely, yeah.
Wow.
So that's another. So nothing was ever wasted either. It was always thrown out to the geese, right?
Okay.
So if there were any wee bits and pieces that, were going to be, that would be for the bin type thing, it was always given to the geese. Food bits, obviously.
So we've got these now sitting on your warm plate.
Yes. So those are going to take probably about 5 minutes each side.
So if someone was doing this in a pan, would you have it on, say, medium heat?
Medium heat, yes.
Okay.
And then what we'll do is we'll give them 5 minutes there, turn them over, give them 5 minutes, and then you have to stand them on each edge dry each edge out as well and bake each edge.
Oh,
Because
okay.
otherwise they could get a seam going down the middle and Granny would never. You can't have a seam.
Are you haunted? Are you haunted
Oh
by all
my
these
gracious. Do you know, someone said to me the other day, I think your granny's walking with you in the kitchen, and I was like, flip open, I'll just tell me off for so many things.
So I get people saying that to me. You're in my head in the kitchen. I think, oh, I hope I'm being nice.
But it's true, you do. You think about what other people could be saying to you, and you think, right, okay, am I doing that right? So you can see even now, Elaine, right, they're starting to grow.
Yeah.
You know, they're starting to just get, and they get real nice and puffy. And you see, there used to be on the side of the road, because I'm from County Tyrone, Northern Ireland, there used to be this place near us in Ballygawley, and they had bacon and egg sodas, right? You know the way you sell burgers?
Yeah.
Well, these were sold out of a van. Soda farls, opened up, buttered, fried egg and bacon.
Oh, wow.
So I got, oh,
That's nice.
it was so good. So I'm going to give these 5 minutes and turn them over and then.
Okay, so you're at the point where we need to turn them over?
Yes, so they're going to be, oh yeah, see that colour, all that lovely brown scorched flour look.
I can tell you, if you're watching this on the video, there's a nice brown scorched look. Oh, and you may also see this lurker in the background on our videos, who is our photographer, not just someone we randomly pulled in from the street.
Elaine, just feel that. Just feel how it stays just really gently. So.
Oh, it's pillowy.
Yes. But on the
I've never
outside.
been asked to feel a soda pearl.
Why don't you bring that to thing and say, just look at, do that again, but so the camera can see it.
Is it going to knock you about?
No.
You sure?
Where to
No, just there, just there,
just
just
me.
there,
Right.
just there.
So Elaine, look at that. You see the scorched
Oh,
flour colour, and it's
looks
really
crusty.
hard there.
Yeah.
Feel there on the other side.
Oh, it's so soft and pillowy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we'll put it back on there, so they want to be a nice colour as well. And see the way they've just started to sit up. They're
Yeah,
just-
so they started about 1 centimetre thick, and they're now growing. They're definitely past 2 centimetres, going up towards 3, I would say.
Yeah.
Are they going to grow even more?
No, they should stop about there, but that's the power of the baking soda. So it's just mixing with the buttermilk, the acidity in the buttermilk, it just gives them that beautiful rise. It just gives off that carbon dioxide and just lets them rise.
So you've just said baking soda,
Mm-hmm.
but we also say bicarbonate of soda. So
Yes.
for anybody that's listening, they're one and the same.
Completely. I started to get into saying bicarbonate soda whenever I was over here in England, but Granny Neil would always have said baking soda.
So I find that fascinating because when I've written my books and I've written bicarbonate of soda,
Mhm.
it's because my publisher is American, they've then changed that to baking soda. But I didn't realise that would have been the same in Ireland.
Yes.
Because that's what you would have said.
Yeah.
Ah, good.
Baking
Ah,
soda.
cool.
So
Okay.
we'll give these another, say, extra 4 minutes now, and then we'll put them on their sides.
Do you know what it looks like almost? When you look at the edges and start to see the bubbles coming, it's like when you score a dome of dough that you've got from making sourdough and you score into
Yes.
it and you see the bubbles inside. That's what it's starting to look like on the edges.
You are so right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, completely.
And it's because of that alchemy between the acid and the buttermilk and the bicarbonate of soda and the bubbles and the growth in the air that they create, isn't it? And which
Absolutely.
can make it often look like the sourdough stuff.
Yes, so these are also part of the Ulster fry. Have you heard of the Ulster fry?
No.
So you know the English breakfast, fried breakfast, the
Yeah.
Ulster fry, you get your eggs and your bacon and, you know, if you want a bit of tomato, mushrooms, right? But these would be cut in half again, so they're like, you know, a smaller triangle, and then you open that triangle up and then you fry it in the pan after you've fried off the bacon and the sausages. So you've got that lovely flavour in
Do you know, you reminded me of what my dad used to do. So when we had a fry up as kids, whatever fat was left in the pan, the bread went in to make fried bread.
Yes.
Yeah, so it was the same kind of thing. So whilst we're waiting for these then, what are the considerations someone should have with baking or cooking differently between an agar and an oven? Because obviously it's on all the time. So when I talk about baking from a cold start, you can't do that in here.
No.
But you've got different temperatures and different doors, is that right?
Yes, so I've got a 4-door Aga. So I've got a roasting oven and a baking oven and a simmering oven and a warming oven. Now for 2 oven Agas, you've got a roasting oven and a simmering oven. So you just need to work your way around with something that's called a cold plane shelf. So it's a piece of sheet metal, like a shelf that goes in, and you can cool down your Aga temperature that way using the cold plane shelf.
Because you're putting something that's cold in it, so it's going to bring the temperature down.
Yes.
Okay, but therefore that would then warm it up, would it, or is it made of something that stays cold?
It warms up, yes, but it takes the initial heat away. So
the simmering and roasting, are they all called those things because they're different temperatures?
yes, that's right.
Okay.
So they would be, roasting oven would run at 200 degrees, baking oven at between 100 and 200, and then simmering about 150, warming 110.
So do you ever, do you have a thermometer that you would put in them on occasion to see what they sit at?
Definitely, I use
Okay.
like a wee metal disc, and I put it in to make sure that I'm going at the right temperature. Absolutely.
So they're pretty classic temperature levels, aren't they? So whatever recipe you've got, you amend it based on what is behind the door.
Yes, and there's certain things that you need to be, like meringues are just one of those things in an Aga. You need to sometimes set it in the roasting oven for 3 minutes maybe, and then move it over to the simmering oven. And
I always thought meringues were one of those things you needed to put in the oven and not touch it. So it's alright if you move them around.
well, yeah, they from a roasting oven they'll set up, and then they'll continue to go in your simmering oven. They'll be absolutely fine.
Okay.
But I have to say, because I've got a convection oven as well, because of when I ran the demos, I did so many recipes in one go, I had to use both ovens.
Yeah.
I always do my meringues in the normal oven because it keeps them really white and bright as well, whereas if you do them in the Aga, they go quite browny.
Okay.
They still taste delicious.
Yeah,
Absolutely
so
delicious.
the look of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to turn these, now they've got a beautiful colour on the
Okay,
other
yeah.
side. What we're going to do is just turn those around, set them all up together so the side gets done. Just like that.
Oh wow, so they're like bookends.
Yes.
Okay.
So just a couple of minutes each side so that they're nicely cooked, and then we'll wrap them in muslin, and then you'll have to try them later on.
You try and stop me. So just a question then, if you hadn't put the flour on, they would still cook alright, they just wouldn't have that brown tint?
Yeah, they would get a slight brown tint, but not that lovely rustic.
But
colour.
would they have stuck?
No, because, I don't know, because I suppose you could sprinkle them with flour before you put them on,
Okay.
and then they wouldn't stick.
Okay.
But
alright.
yeah, but always. And also, I think it was a thing as well years ago with the griddle. They put the flour on to see if the griddle was hot enough.
Yes,
And
to see if it
yes,
responded.
yes.
Yes. Okay, I get it. So we've now got them on their ends
Yes.
with all that lovely holy edges looking at us.
Yeah, so they're all leaning against each other. And then, let's see, as soon as it's sort of set up like that, you can just turn them around.
So what we're doing, you're just setting the edges rather than
Yes.
making it too dark.
Yeah.
So is this, with sourdough we always have the joy of needing to wait really until it's cooled a bit before we slice into it to get the best out of it. Is this something you can eat warm straight off the griddle?
Oh my word, yes.
Okay.
So,
And you expect me not to do that? You expect me to wait for you to make something else before I can try it?
well, maybe you have time, we could have it warm, but honestly, and what Grandad used to do, he used to get one, slice it into fingers and have it with boiled goose eggs in the morning for breakfast.
We'll need to come and stay at your granny's.
Honestly, oh my word, it was just so good.
It sounds like wonderful memories.
Do you know, I have got really happy food memories, I have to say, from whenever I was wee. We had the bread man who came round, because Mummy, as I say, Mummy never baked. And what Granny gave us on a Sunday would never blasted us as a family. I've got 3 sisters. We'd never blasted us as a family throughout the week, right? So with the bread man, he used to come on a Saturday. Don Ferguson, I'll never forget him, whenever he pulled out the big wooden tray at the back, and the smell in there, Elaine, was amazing. Do you remember Parish buns with the pearls of sugar on the top?
Yeah.
Those, and split buns with, but it wasn't a real cream, it was like a fake cream, and then the red sauce over the top, and I just remember thinking, oh my word, they look delicious. But we couldn't afford those, we never got those, but we got nutty crust bread in wax paper. And nutty crust was like a batch bread, but it takes 24 hours to make. Interesting. Fermentation stage. And it's real funny because my cousin married Mr. Nutty Crust's granddaughter, so we say that's the closest thing to celebrity we've had in our family, right? Because Nutty Crust is like all over the place. So we had those, and that's always bought sliced. But then there were batch breads as well, and we used to buy around Christmas time that weren't sliced, because she used those to make breadcrumbs for the Christmas pudding and Christmas cake. Mummy's Christmas pudding and Christmas cake were absolutely fantastic.
Wow.
And she used to grate them with the old grater, you know, the old metal grater. She stood and
So
she grated.
you need to write a book of Mummy's recipes, Mummy's and Granny's recipes.
Honestly.
It sounds amazing, but all of that love and flavour and history through it. Oh.
Honestly, and then but then we'd go around to this area called Brownie. When Daddy would ask us to move the cows, we'd go around this area called Brownie, and we'd go around and we'd pack ourselves a packed lunch, and it was literally the heel of the bread or the crust of the bread, but buttered, because there was no real butter in the house, it was only margarine. But we would have that, and we would just bring that, and we'd go out for hours after we'd moved the cows, and we would just cycle around the roads on our bicycles. Oh, it was great crack, it was great. Loved it. Right, these are nearly done.
Okay, so Cherie has done all 3 edges of the triangles now because we've got the 4 quarters. So all 3 edges have been sitting on the heat. Yeah, and now you wrap them in the muslin.
Indeed. So, I'm just going to get my muslin out. And then just take them up like this. And
So
then,
you're just wrapping them like a parcel.
yeah,
And the muslin is going to remind us.
it keeps the crust nice and soft so they don't dry out, they steam in there.
Oh, okay. So they're still going to be steaming. They're still going to be.
Smell it.
Oh.
That's childhood right there.
Smells amazing.
Oh, so
we are happily smelling a ball of muslin right now. But my God, it smells amazing.
quite. So they'll still keep their lovely firm crust on the outside, but inside they're like nice and almost
Okay, so
chewy.
you're going to keep the crust firm with this.
Yes.
See, this is a tip. When people ask for wanting sourdough that's not as crusty, I always advise them to wrap it in muslin or
There you
clean
go.
tea towel when it comes out the oven to soften the crust.
Yes.
So the steam softens it. But with this, it's going to stay crusty.
It won't stay really crusty. It'll stay. It sounds silly, but it'll stay firm.
Okay.
But it won't go all real soft.
Okay, because if it's like with 2 pieces of toast, and my husband makes toast, he'll stack them, like in a triangle, so they don't steam each other, make each other soggy.
Yes.
So that's not going to happen in there.
No, so they're just going to stay nice and soft. But can you feel? If you feel on the outside, do you feel that it's still quite
I feel
firm?
warm.
But if you squeeze, you can feel the softness. I can't quite.
Oh, it's a little
describe it.
parcel of joy.
So let's just, I tell you.
Well, Cherie's now going to show us how she makes lemon curd, whilst I'm just going to smell the soda farls.
Right, I'll get my.
Massive, huge thank you for having us here today. It's just been amazing. I am very hungry now, but it's just been brilliant. And I don't think you realise what a wealth of knowledge you are.
Oh, you're too kind.
But the tips and the little things that come out through your entire conversation are just invaluable for people in their home kitchens. Thank you so much for having us here today. We will make sure that everybody knows where to find you.
Yeah.
I know that you're like me. Whatever questions people have got, send them your way.
Absolutely.
And just, I would pretend to apologise to everyone listening that they can't share the food. But I'm really not that sorry, because we're going to thoroughly enjoy it. So thank you so much. It's been amazing.
Thank you. I have
Amazing.
loved every second of it. It's just been brilliant. It's having a chat in the kitchen, you're what could be nicer? I'm sharing a bit of food.
Exactly, and isn't this what we love? This is the whole reason that we're doing this podcast.
Yeah.
Is just to share what people love. That you know, this is a home kitchen. You have 3 children. This is, you know,
Yeah.
there's always people around. You need to provide food easily, quickly, as well as inspiring people online, and you know,
Yeah.
it's just it's real people in their real kitchens, and it's just wonderful.
Well, I think as well that people need to know that, you know what, good food doesn't have to be complicated, and it doesn't have to be difficult, and you can just put a few ingredients together and have something that's nurturing and lovely and comforting for your family, for your friends. Do you know what, I used to do dinner parties a lot. I don't do them so much more now because of COVID, but you know, I'm just enjoying going back to basics.
Yeah.
I love that.
Brilliant. Although
Thank
I have
you,
to
Lily.
say, nothing that you make looks basic to me.
And you're lovely.
Amazing.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to just keep on cuddling our little muslin baby here and say goodbye so that I can start eating them. Thank you.
Thank you. Aww.
Brilliant.
Well done.